Welcome to the Winchell, Frieze, and Brockman Improvements Project. As we get started, I'm going to cover a brief technology overview. A couple of things to know that you'll see on the screen. It includes that you can leave and rejoin this meeting at any time unless the meeting is at capacity or you are removed for inappropriate behavior. We will cover a brief presentation and then take questions. You can submit questions through the Q&A window at any time, which we'll cover shortly how to do that. The meeting presentation that we're sharing tonight will be provided at a2gov.org/Winchell. We'll also be recording tonight's presentation, and that recording will be posted at the same project website, a2gov.org/Winchell. All attendees are muted. We'll be covering instructions on how to unmute. The video camera is disabled for all attendees, and attendee screen share is prohibited. Next slide. In addition to this technology overview, I'm also going to mention that we have a poll that you should see on the screen in front of you. This is a demographic poll, and it helps the City of Ann Arbor understand who we're hearing from at our public engagement so that we can make improvements and make better efforts to provide inclusive public engagement opportunities by learning from who is not part of the conversation and identifying who doesn't typically participate in these meetings and events. So we thank you for your participation in that. It is optional and it is anonymous. On to the technology overview. You'll see the screen in front of you shows how to ask questions and share comments. So we're meeting tonight in Zoom, and you should have a raise hand feature on your screen. That may be along the bottom of the screen, at the top of the screen. It sort of varies depending on the device that you are connected with tonight. You'll push that raise hand button if you would like to ask a question or share a comment, and then staff will unmute you so that you can do so. You can also submit comments through a Q&A window. You should have an icon along, again, the banner that's either at the top or bottom of your screen for Q&A. There's a checkbox within that where you can submit your question or comment anonymously if you prefer, and then go ahead and send those, and staff will be monitoring that. You can send in those written questions at any time, and we'll take them whenever we get an opportunity as the presentation completes. It doesn't look like we have any phone participants with us currently, but if we do have any phone participants I'm not seeing, you would press *9 to raise your hand, and that will give an indication to staff that you have a question or comment to share. Next slide. I'll cover some brief meeting norms. So we're here for learning. We don't want to speculate. So we encourage you to ask questions that we can explore together and not pass any judgment on others' opinions or comments or perspectives on these issues. We want to hear from each of you. So please raise your hand, wait until you are recognized to speak, and allow for one speaker at a time. When you are speaking, please move to a quiet area and silence any background sounds. Speak loudly and clearly. Everyone will be provided a chance to speak before a repeat speaker. And remember the importance of the rights and dignity of others. So again, we'll be critiquing ideas, not people. We need to be thoughtful about the language that we use so that this can remain comfortable and respectful for all of our participants. Any inappropriate written or verbal attacks will be cause for removal from this meeting. So as we're getting started and establishing these meeting norms, this is the time where I'd like to ask if there's anything we've missed or anything you'd like to add. So you can use that raise hand button on your window if you would like to add anything to the meeting norms or if you have questions or concerns. And I don't see any hands raised or comments that are related to our meeting norms, so we can move to the next slide. And over to you, Fran. And we are not hearing you yet, Fran. You're currently muted.
Hi, everyone.
So it looks like Fran's sorting out some audio connection. I can cover the agenda while we work through that. As you can see, those that are joining and can see the screen in front of them, we have planned a presentation from staff. The project team will present covering introductions. We will cover some information about the project location, the purpose, and the scope. The proposed sidewalk concept. So we're looking at some new sidewalk installation as part of these improvements. Also, a potential intersection reconfiguration is on the table for discussion. We'll discuss design and construction impacts and the timeline and next steps. We hope to get through that in about 30 minutes and leave plenty of time for general audience question and answer. This meeting tonight is going to be followed by a survey available through our project website, although you can get to it directly at a2gov.org/Winchell survey. No space there, that's a typo. Apologies for that. We'll get it correct when it's posted on the website, but there will be this follow-up survey where we'll be collecting specific feedback for preferences on the alternatives available for the Winchell sidewalk, which we're going to cover in much greater detail in the slides that follow, and to get some feedback from the community members about the intersection and whether or not changes are needed there. So that's a little preview of what's to come, but we do hope that in addition to being at this meeting tonight, you take a few moments and complete that survey. We'll have that live and we'll post that survey link out for you before this meeting wraps up tonight. And let's try again, Fran.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, it's having an echo there. Hi, everyone. My name is Francisca Chan. I'm the project manager. And thank you, Kayla, for giving us the brief technology overview for Zoom. Looking forward to getting to hear from everybody later on during our Q&A. But for the next 30 minutes, I'll just go over what Kayla mentioned, project scope. So let's move on. So at this moment, I want to do introductions. Like I said, I'm Francisca, and I will let the rest of the project team introduce themselves. Starting with Nick.
Hi, I'm Nick Hutchinson. I'm the city engineer, the manager of the engineering department here at the city of Ann Arbor.
Cynthia.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Cynthia Redinger, and I am one of the city's transportation engineers.
And I am Kayla Coleman. I was provided your introductory slides. I'm a community engagement specialist here with the City of Ann Arbor, working with Francisca and Cynthia and Nick on this project. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. So launching into our project overview. So there's a lot of information on this map, so let me cover it a little bit. So this is the project location. We are, of course, installing a water main. That's the main part of this project. We will convert a 6-inch existing water main by installing a 12-inch and then reconnecting service. That will be at Frieze Avenue. And as part of that project, we're also installing sidewalk. So that will be on both sides of Frieze. On Brockman, we are transferring some service. So that's less construction, but it will impact especially the intersections at Frieze and Brockman. At Frieze and Winchell at Brockman Street Boulevard, I mean. And at Winchell, we're also having we're going to be reconnecting water service to a 12-inch main, and it also will include sidewalk installation. We also have thought about possible intersection reconfiguration at Brockman Winchell Carhartt intersection. After we conducted a survey a few months ago, we received some community, there was a survey done, and some of the community members expressed concern about this intersection, so we will be discussing that later on as well. So the main reason for the installation of the water main would be for improving water quality, water flow. This main has a history of breakage. So that's a good reason that we're installing a new one. And going from a 6-inch water main to a 12-inch will definitely improve everyone's water quality and water flow. We're also hoping to improve fire hydrant coverage and capacity. In terms of the sidewalk installation, again, this is consistent with Ann Arbor's moving together towards Vision Zero. So we're very excited that we get to do this joint project with, including the sidewalk there. It will improve pedestrian safety, and we hope that it will encourage more active transportation in the community. If you want more information about sidewalk and our sidewalk gap elimination program, I've included the link down there. Again, what I mentioned earlier, we did have a survey done in May 2021. So this survey was, I think, given to most of the properties near the streets that are affected for the future construction. And some residents expressed safety concerns. So we have thought about possible design changes. So I will go over that in the rest of the presentation.
And just to highlight, and the comment bubbles, there are some of the feedback that we heard from that May 2021 survey, and that is why we're continuing this discussion here tonight. There was a range of perspectives. We only had a few respondents, but some people said the intersection is fine, others felt the intersection is not safe, or that it's confusing. So that's a lead into why this conversation is continuing. We're looking for additional feedback.
Thank you, Kayla. I also wanted to explain what the road right-of-way is. So that's the property that is owned by the city. This includes the road, the pavement, and usually the extension of property behind the pavement. In this case, usually sidewalks are located within the road right-of-way. For these locations, Frieze, Brockman, Winchell, they don't have sidewalk, but I want to show you a map where we have our current right-of-way. So this is your current location. Frieze, Brockman. I know it's a little hard to read, but you can see how the blue line details the city's current right-of-way. So moving on, these are the existing conditions. This picture on the left is looking east on Frieze Avenue. As you can see, there is no sidewalk, so we want to install one there. Also, the other picture on the right is looking east on Winchell Drive. We would like to install a sidewalk on that east-hand side. So I wanted to give a little bit of background to how we decided the sidewalk alignment. And the design is not finalized. So just to explain, this was the initial design. Usually we do 6 inches off the right-of-way. That was that map I showed earlier. In this case, when we did that initial alignment, we realized that it would impact a lot of trees, a lot of vegetations. As you can see, the X's are trees that would have to be removed. So the blue highlighted line would be the new proposed sidewalks on Frieze, Brockman, and Winchell. So after looking at that, we wanted to come up with a new alignment to see how we can minimize vegetation and tree impact. So this is the current proposed alignment. As you can see on Brockman, we were able to curve it. So there should not be any tree removal in that area, and the vegetation removal would be minimized. On Frieze, unfortunately, there wasn't much we could do. We're looking at kind of limited right-of-way area. So there still will be some trees that will be impacted. And on Winchell Drive, I want to focus out a little bit more because there was significant tree impact with our original proposed alignment. And so we decided to explore different options and see if maybe this could be an area where we can make an exception and move the sidewalk on the road. But I want to go over the different alternatives of what that would mean. That would mean you would lose on-street parking. So we're going to explore those two different options for Winchell Drive. But because Brockman and Frieze are already at the ideal alignment, those are pretty set for now. But we definitely would like your feedback on those as well. If you have specific questions, we can address those at the Q&A, or you can email me later. So this is the proposed alternative number 1. Again, this is the standard 6 inches off the right of way. So as you can tell on Winchell Drive, those X's are tree removals. So we would have to, because they're right on the sidewalk location. And this is a zoomed in version of the cross section of what that would mean. So on the left, we have the existing configuration. So this is looking straight on Winchell Drive. And the proposed configuration is on the right-hand side. So this would be, again, having to remove most of the trees on the right of way, but still preserving street parking. And alternative number 2, this is moving our alignment of the sidewalk onto the roadway. So we would maintain most of the trees. Most of the trees are likely able to stay. So the red circles are 5-foot radius from the center of the tree. And usually we would cut down trees that are within 5 foot of the sidewalk. But in this case, there's already a curb. So most likely, most of the trees would be able to stay. Since the roots are already contained by the curb, we would remove the curb and just install the sidewalk. But again, this would eliminate parking. So that's one consequence of this alignment. So I wanted to show you a cross section of that alternative number 2. Again, on the left-hand side, you have your existing configuration. There's the parking lane, the trees on the right of way. And then on your right-hand side, you have the new configuration. You have the 5-foot sidewalk, and you have the trees in the right of way, but then the parking is removed. So to summarize, we're looking at 2 alternatives right now for Winchell Drive. Alternative number 1, keep on-street parking, remove most trees within the right-of-way, and it also includes tree replanting. So even though we are removing trees, we will replant them. Alternative number 2 would be remove on-street parking. Tree removals are less unlikely. This will be part of the survey that was mentioned in the beginning, and we will give you a link at the end of the meeting today so that you can fill out that survey. So this would be a choice that we're asking the community to vote on, and also to express your concerns about this alignment or anything else. So moving on, I also wanted to talk about the Brockman Carhartt Winchell intersection. So this is the intersection I'm referring to. Looking northeast on Brockman Boulevard, we have Winchell Drive, Brockman, and then Carhartt it's kind of a little hard to see, but it's a 3-street intersection. And the current situation is that there is a small island in the center, and at the Winchell Brockman side, there is no sidewalk. So we would be still installing that. The current scope is to install the sidewalk, and also to have some striping on those 2 streets, on Brockman and on Winchell Drive. So I wanted to cover some concepts that we came up with as we thought about the feedback that we received from the community regarding possible concerns of at this intersection. So again, the existing condition is right here on the left. There is the median in the center. And some concepts that we came up with would be the one on the right, concept number 1. It would be removing the island in the center. It would be restriping, repaving, and new curbing. So it's a pretty expensive addition. It would cost around $200 to $300K. This is in addition to the original project scope, which is the water main and the sidewalk installation. So that would almost double the project cost, but we would be able to add it if it is a significant concern in the community. And that's something that we really want to get your input. So it will be part of the survey that will be given at the end. these are two other concepts. You can see how this one is a little bit different. It's a T intersection. Well, it's similar to concept number one, which is also a T intersection on Brockman Boulevard. And you would have also two main, well, this one is two main pedestrian walkways that would be restriped. It's also a significant amount of new curb, new repaving. And we would extend the curb on Brockman Carhartt to help with slowing down vehicles and reducing that pedestrian walkway. As you can see, concept number 2, 3, and 1 are pretty similar cost. So both of these three concepts that we explored would be almost the same amount of money. And for
As we're
concept,
talking, as we're talking about the amount of money, could you just clarify that that is not a special assessment or a direct cost to the property owner? That would be part of the project cost that is funded through existing city funds.
Right, I didn't go over funding. Yes, so part of the sidewalk installation is covered by the sidewalk millage. So if we were to do this intersection work, we would find funding for this. It is no longer the responsibility of the property owner to pay for new sidewalk. And so this would be, we would find funding for this intersection improvement.
Yeah, and just to clarify, that's the same thing with the intersection. These prices are shown, these costs are shown just for reference purposes, just to give an idea of the additional cost that the project would incur. But the street millage would be paying for this if we decided to go forward with any of it. There would not be any special assessments or any additional cost to any property owners.
Yes, thanks for that clarification. That's correct. I think the third concept is pretty self-explanatory. It's a roundabout. There's very clear striping and pedestrian walkways. And there's also a median in the center. It'd probably be a concrete median. So this is a summary of the three different concepts that I mentioned. Again, the existing condition is shown there. And again, the current scope is to just add the sidewalk and do the pedestrian striping. But we did explore concepts 1 to 3. So we do want to hear your input, and at the Q&A, we will give more information and you can ask questions. All right. So moving on to design and construction. So possible impacts include some changes to the drive approaches, just because the trenching work for the water installation might come close. Right now, almost all the trenching is in the road, but there is some that is kind of close to the driveway. So if that happens, we of course would repair your driveway and make it as good or better than it was before. Some trees and landscaping features would be removed or disturbed. Again, for Winchell Drive, the on-street may be removed. It depends which alternative is decided upon. Also, property owners would be responsible for winter maintenance. So this means snow removal and ice clearing for the sidewalk in front of their property. Our team, I just want to reiterate that our team will make every effort to avoid any private property impacts and will coordinate directly with that property owner as needed. I think the sidewalk installation, what you're responsible for and what the city is responsible for is sometimes a little bit unclear. So this is a table that kind of summarizes the different responsibilities. So again, the full cost of the sidewalk installation would be paid for by the city because of the new sidewalk millage. We're able to use those funds to pay for that. Future repairs would also be our responsibility, but winter maintenance like snow and ice removal would be the property owner. And if there is a retaining wall, and maintenance for that retaining wall, it would be the city. For this construction of this sidewalk, there's only one property owner that is affected or might have a retaining wall, and I will reach out to them directly to coordinate with that with them and to see if they would want a retaining wall or whether there's another option. So it's not really applicable for any of the other properties. Also, other construction impacts would be access and services, but I just want to clarify, even though the streets will be closed to thorough traffic, there will be local access for residents. So traffic would be detoured, but of course, for all the residents, you still have access to your driveway and to the street. There are some exceptions. If we're doing construction right in front of your driveway, it will be closed, but we will notify you directly in advance for that closure, and there shouldn't be that many. There will also be access to all your regular services. So mail, trash, recycling, and emergency vehicles will still have access. And we will do our best to minimize disruptions and to notify the residents of any negative impacts that will affect your property during construction. Like I mentioned earlier, on-street parking restrictions will occur. So I know right now there is parking allowed on those streets, but there's also other residential parking available at the other streets like Frieze on the other side of Brockman, or maybe Carhartt. So those would be available, but you can always park in your own driveway. That, like I said, driveway is still accessible, even if on-street parking is no longer during the construction duration. Depending on the street and the level of construction, it will vary. Frieze has the most amount of construction, so 3 to 6 weeks, versus Brockman and Winchell, it's more like 2 to 3 weeks. So as the project progresses, more information will be given in terms of schedule. Also, construction will generate dust and noise during working hours. We apologize. We will do our best to keep that at a minimal. And there will also be water shut off while we're reconnecting to the existing water main. There will be one day where that will happen, and you will be notified at least 3 days in advance, and also the day of. That is one of the 2 water shutoffs. There's only this one, and there will be one other time where for 1 hour water will be shut off while the water services is being reconnected to the water main. So that will be for 1 hour. So 1 day and then 1 hour. And again, we will communicate that when that is. The water main installation, I mentioned that there will be significant amount of trenching, especially for Frieze. Brockman and Winchell will be a lot less, but still to install the new water main, 6 feet deep, but it will be restored. Those areas will be repatched. So next steps. Right now, we're hoping to finalize design by November and December. So once we finalize that, we'll get a construction company to bid on this project and to start planning. We're hoping that construction will start in the summer. We know that there are some schools nearby, so we want to time it so that it'll begin once school is let out. If you want more information and regular project updates, I would highly encourage that you sign up for email notifications. This link is on our website, so it's located a2gov.org Winchell, and you just have to sign up by clicking that sign up Gov delivery, and we can send you email updates. This is for both the construction phase and even the design phase. Next steps is that this meeting recording will be posted within the website 1 week from today. Also, we have that online survey that we mentioned. If you can fill that out in the next 2 weeks, you have until October 13th, and we will put the link on the chat at the end. The sidewalk and intersection design decisions will consider this survey and all the different responses and questions that you have. So please let us know at the end what questions you have, what concerns you have. And if you want to contact me to request an individual meeting or discussion or even a project visit, that's fine. I think the best way would be to fill out that survey and specifically request a phone call or a meeting to discuss your individual property. but this meeting is mostly just to cover just general project scope and different general project impacts. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand it over to Kayla, who will be our moderator for the Q&A.
Thanks, Fran. And we have had a couple of questions come in through the chat. I'm going to address those here in a moment, and others can continue to submit them through the Q&A. Again, for those who've joined since I covered the technology overview, you should see a icon that has a little hand icon. It's likely either at the top or the bottom of your screen. That's your raise hand button. We'll take verbal questions and comments that way. If you're joining through phone, you would press *9 to indicate that you are raising your hand, and then you can be unmuted to speak. And there's a Q&A icon. It's two little chat bubbles, and you should, again, see that either at the top or bottom of your screen and submit your written questions that way. I'm going to cover a couple that came in throughout the presentation. One came in just before we got to the timeline slide. So there was a question of the estimated start date. And as Fran covered, that is anticipated for spring or summer of 2022. So hope that was addressed. The question was submitted before the presentation slide. Another one that came in, there's one that came in when we were talking about the sidewalk alternatives. And the question was, does option 2, alternative 2, remove parking on both sides of the street? And by the street, I believe we're talking about Winchell. So Fran, could you talk about whether parking is currently allowed on both sides of the street and how that is impacted with the proposed alternative?
I don't remember if it's on both sides of the street, but it would only remove parking on one when we looked at the design.
Hey, Fran, I believe, if I remember correctly, that there's already no parking on the south side of Winchell. So I think this would remove the parking from the north side, meaning for that few hundred feet, there would not be any on-street parking. Again, if I remember correctly.
That's consistent with what I remembered from our project meetings. I think that some may have said they've seen cars parked there. It is not currently allowed. The current regulations for that street are such that it's only on one side. So we are only talking about impacting that one side. The next question is about concept 3 on the intersection. You know what, before I take that one, let me stick with the sidewalk just to try to keep us a little straight here. Alternative 1 for the Winchell sidewalk includes replanting for trees that are removed. Where would those be replanted?
Typically, we would replant those trees between the new sidewalk and the curb. I believe the plans we have give enough space in there, at least 3 feet, that we could plant some trees in that area. We would certainly go through that with the city forester, who is the tree expert, to choose the appropriate plantings there.
Thank you. And in terms of sidewalk material, we're talking about concrete sidewalks, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. And there was some feedback. This is a comment that parking is permitted on the south side of Winchell. So that's something the project team can follow up on. But to our understanding from our prior discussions, it actually is not. But we appreciate that feedback from the meeting participant.
Yeah, we will look into it, because if we narrow the street, I'm not sure if that parking will be allowed, given the street width. So we will look into the regulations and standards for that.
Thank you. And question, is 5 feet an extra wide sidewalk? I believe that is our standard, but I'll let the engineers clarify.
Yeah,
Yep,
that's
that is, yep, correct. Thanks.
You have 2 engineers, 3 engineers here.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, let's jump over to, I'm going to take just one other question that was about the intersection, and then I'm going to take the hand raise. I see Malcolm, you'll be first on the list for a verbal question. But in terms of sorry, Cynthia, did you want to add something before I switch over? I see you have something to cover on the parking.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify and clean that up a little bit. So there is a section of Winchell that has no parking, and that is the section that is adjacent to the park. And we have a lot of locations like this in the city where the parking has been limited next to parks. I think that it was a concern at some point in time where a lot of these no parking areas went in, and that area next to the park is not, it doesn't necessarily need to be no parking for an operational reason. The area that we're talking about adding the sidewalk in where it would come into the street a little bit and be able to save all of those trees, that area, the resulting width will only be 20 feet at that point. So operationally in a residential neighborhood, we could go down to a 9-foot lane in each direction, so 18 feet. But we need to maintain at least the 20 feet for our fire services. So at that point in time, there really isn't enough width left to allow parking on either side of the street in that section. But as Nick referenced earlier, it is a short section. And as staff, I think we can look at that other no parking area and make some determinations as to whether or not that needs to remain or whether that can be lifted and allow parking down there.
Thanks, Cynthia, for those clarification points. Now let's go ahead and jump to the intersection question. And this was in regard to concept 3 for the Winchell Carhartt Brockman intersection. The question is about whether it includes a concrete median that was stated during the presentation. Could we clarify on the drawing where this might be? It looks like the island is still grass, and I think that's because it's green on the image. So can Fran, you move to the slide where you have the different concepts for a visual, and then up to Cynthia, whether this is something Cynthia's best to address, or Fran, in terms of the details of the medians, concrete median, splitter islands, whatever they are technically called. Let's get an engineer to weigh in there.
I think Cynthia, if you could share your thoughts.
Sure. So as you can see, that central island in the roundabout, and it's not a perfect circle because of the approaches of the intersection. It's a standard design for a roundabout and an intersection of this shape. So that central island, the intent is for it to be green space. So if that could be grass, that could be some other things. Our forestry department would probably be interested in having a tree in there. So that can all be permeable surface and vegetation. The splitter islands here, so if you think about an intersection such as Nixon, Duvar, and Green, or Earhart and Geddes, you have that raised splitter intersection, and those are in concrete. But in a residential neighborhood with the lower volumes and the lower speeds, you don't need to have that raised island. And it's a very typical design to put those in with paint. And we have an example of that already existing on Pittsfield Boulevard, where we have the painted splitter islands on the approach to the roundabout.
So I hope that helped to clarify. It sounds like the previous statement that it might include a concrete median didn't intend to be that there would be a full concrete island. It would be a curb around it with vegetation in the center.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that as well, the center island could be that. It could be a fully concrete island in the middle as well. One of the things that we need to take into consideration in making that decision is that there is maintenance. Somebody will have to mow that center island if it's put in grass, and we would have to make sure that there's allocations made for that. I don't know who mows the additional island that's out there right now, but that's something we would have to look into and taking into consideration what goes in there.
Thank you, Nick. All right, I'm going to take, there's a question from Park Malcolm. I see your hand has been raised. I've allowed you to speak. You'll need to press your unmute button, and then you can go ahead and ask your question.
Excuse me. A couple observations. First, an answer to a question in terms of a neighbor in the Brockman area is one who takes care of the center circle at this point in time and decorates it with seasonally appropriate things, just something he likes to do. Sidewalks. I live on Brockman down near Frieze. I'm sure many of you know on Brockman from Frieze toward Packard, there's a section where there is not any sidewalk on either side of the street. Brockman being a nice cut through for people to use to avoid the light at Packard and Stadium. We get a high volume of traffic, and speeds are certainly going to increase since we have a nice smooth surface and have lost our speed bumps, our naturally occurring speed bumps. So I would like to see, if possible, a reallocation of some of the funding for the sidewalks up in the proposed area to put at least the sidewalk on one side of Brockman down in that area. A lot of people are walking in the streets, obviously with dogs, etc., and traffic tends to be kind of speedy as they accelerate toward following through on the cut through. If this means that we only have a sidewalk on, say, one side of Winchell, where there's low traffic volume, then I think that would be a good trade-off. Second comment, I've lived here in this neighborhood since the early 70s. I have never seen or known of any sort of a traffic problem, like an accident or anything, down where the island is. So from my perspective, spending a couple $100,000 to redo that is not a good use of money and probably going to provide a very low return on the money spent. If you want to spend a little money sort of reshaping it or making it a little bit different so it's a more functional or aesthetic like it is, then that's fine. That's all that I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate those comments. And so in summary, we thank you that clarification, there's a Brockman neighbor taking care of that center island currently. In regards to the intersection and the crash history, I'll turn that over to Cynthia if she can confirm, but I think that is accurate, that we don't have a documented crash history at the intersection. As you shared anecdotally, you've not seen any in your history living there. And so Cynthia, first, do you want to address that? Is that accurate or anything that you're aware of otherwise?
I cannot recall if it was all crashes that we did not have crash history. We specifically looked for non-motorized crashes and did not find any current non-motorized crashes. However, I would like to take the moment to just mention that this is not the most inviting intersection to cross at. And as part of our newly passed transportation plan, we want to design to prevent crashes, and that's part of Vision Zero. And the other thing to consider is that Carhartt is a route directly to the elementary school. So part of what we're looking at is pedestrian access across this intersection.
Great. Thank you, Cynthia, for those clarifications. The other comment we heard or question from Park Malcolm was, the Brockman near Ferdon, the existing sidewalk gap out in that direction, I understand it, and an interest in refocusing funds that way. Nick, is that something you would like to cover?
Yeah, I was just going to say real quickly about the sidewalk gap comment there. We do have now that we have a new sidewalk millage for installing sidewalks for the first time, we do have a program for filling sidewalk gaps. Further down Brockman is a little bit outside of the scope of this project here. But I would encourage you maybe to go to our webpage, a2gov.org/new sidewalks. And there's more information about that program there, and how that could be considered for a future sidewalk gap filling. So wanted to add that in.
Thanks, Nick. All right, let's take a question from Alana Donahue. Alana, I have allowed you to speak. Yep, looks like you've unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, I live at the corner of Brockman and Frieze. I moved in about a year ago, but I've lived in this neighborhood just about my whole life. I have to agree with Malcolm that it seems unnecessary to spend so much money on the island area. That's kind of also the heart of the neighborhood. Like he was saying, we keep it decorated, we take care of it. So if it is going to have to change, I would consider the fact that we would want green space to continue to kind of keep the aesthetic of our neighborhood and keep what we've been doing there. I am all for maybe adding some pedestrian crosswalks, but I don't think that we really need to redesign that and spend so much money. Also, the graph around my house seems off to me. You say that there won't be any trees to remove along the side of Brockman. I'm at the corner of Brockman and Frieze. That looks incorrect to me. We're going to have to uproot. Yeah, if we could pull that up. So yeah, you have one red X on Frieze. There are actually 2 trees on Brockman as well. One is a very mature maple and one is an oak tree along Brockman. The oak tree is newer.
Okay.
So 2 X's missing. And I guess I just don't understand the need. It's going to be, I have a quarter lot, so there's going to be so much responsibility for shoveling that when I bought my home, I was not considering. I have a bad back, so I didn't think this was going to be a problem. So I don't really understand why, if we could just fill in some gaps on Frieze and then we have sidewalk on the other side, why we need to uproot so many people's trees and gardens and things. Just seems like a lot. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Alana. I appreciate those comments. And in summary, so the comment about the intersection reconfiguration and the concern about the amount of money that would require, and also though noting if there is a change to be made, an interest in I believe it's concept 3, the one that includes the green space to maintain some of that aesthetic of your neighborhood. And then the note on need to reevaluate, look more closely at tree impacts along Brockman, and concern that some additional trees may be impacted there, as well as concern about the winter maintenance responsibility for the adjacent property owner for new sidewalks. Thank you, Alana. I see Ken. Ken, you should now be able to go ahead and ask your question, share your comment. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for taking the time to show us these plans and go through the details. I live on the corner, the southeast corner of Winchell and Hall, to give you sort of context. So I really appreciate the focus on the pedestrian safety and the adding of the crosswalks to get us from the south side of Winchell to the north side of Winchell and Brockman and beyond. So just wanted to note that. Maybe just following up on the prior comment about the green space, it seems like in the previous slide where you showed the 4 options, and maybe if someone could shoot to that slide, that would be helpful to illustrate my question. It seems like in the 4 designs, you're not necessarily addressing the impervious concrete, the reduction of the impervious concrete, which was one of your goals, except for concept 3. But what I heard you sort of mentioning was that in all of these concepts 1, 2, and 3, it's unclear from the city planner perspective of whether these would be concrete, or particularly the island, if it would be concrete, or whether it would be, have some green and vegetation to reduce that impervious surface. So I think it's difficult from a resident perspective to be asked to give feedback on these specific concepts if we don't know more specifics on, say, will that island be a full concrete island, which, as has already been mentioned, really distinctly changes the character of the neighborhood. And if you couple that sort of with the reduction of space, of street space on Winchell Drive, it almost creates a feel of much more concrete jungle rather than the existing sort of green space and center to the neighborhood for that island. So if there's additional clarification as to what choices would need to be made for concept 3 to retain that character of actual green space to address the impervious concrete problem that you identified in the first slide, that would be helpful to really understand before providing feedback as to one of these solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
I
Yeah,
just wanted
if I could jump in there real quickly, being that now knowing that the island that's out there now is being maintained by the neighborhood and whatnot, I'm sure we can find a way to have that planted and not have to have it all concrete. I say that only because we've experienced circumstances before where we've planted in things like pedestrian islands, where we've planted them initially, and people have said that they were going to maintain them, and then it didn't happen, and they turn into weeds. But if we have a strong neighborhood desire to maintain them, and the existing one that's out there has been maintained, I think we can safely go ahead and say that we can put vegetation back into that island.
I also wanted to add that these are initial concepts. These are not final. So even though we are asking for you to vote on one, I think our main reason was just to gauge the community concern for this intersection and explore some options of what is possible. But this would be initial concepts. So what you vote, or if you choose not to vote, that's fine. In the survey, we do ask, is this intersection even a concern? And we do ask for you to vote on a concept, but again, it would be only to have a starting point for our design. There would be a lot more refinement in terms of what is the final designs for that intersection if we were to do something. And yeah, one of them would be whether it's fully concrete median or whether it's, there's vegetation. When I had said concrete, I meant what Cynthia clarified, that it would be a concrete curb versus painted, like a painted median.
And Fran, if you don't mind my interjecting, as Fran said, these are more preliminary concepts, but I would point out where you see that the curb line has changed. So in all 3 of these concepts, if when polling, you're really, thinking about that impervious surface and what that impervious surface change could look like, where the curb line has changed and come into the streets where the street's footprint currently is, where we don't have, the curb and gutter line, and where we don't have the sidewalk showing, that will be green space, most likely lawn, because that's typically what occurs between the curb line and, where that lawn extension area is. Most times it's turf. So that would become impervious surface, or sorry, that would become impervious surface removal areas in all three of these concepts.
All right, thank you, Cynthia, for clarifying. And I think that rounds us out through addressing the last set of feedback. And I'm going to take just one more. I think Ken was who we heard from last, and it's your hand up again. We'll try to get back to you, Ken, if we can. Looks like your hand went down. So Jean, your hand is up. I'll take your question or comment now, and then I'm going to cycle through some written questions and comments next. So go ahead, Jean.
Okay, I live on the corner of Winchell and Brockman. And I like the idea of having the sidewalk in the traffic lane or in the parking lane on Winchell Drive in front of my house in order to save some of the trees, or most of the trees. My other point is that if you look at the concrete or the sidewalks on any one of those concepts, they're all different. So it would seem to me that if you're going to change the intersection, you have to change the intersection to one of the three choices in order to do the concrete driveway or sidewalks correctly. And the other thing is that I have a question on the water main. Is the main water main on Winchell Drive going to be replaced to a 12-inch? And my point is also that Brockman is strictly a pass-through from Packard to Stadium. There's a lot of traffic, dock trucks, big trucks, and a lot of cars. So it is a pass-through. And how do we slow that down? That's my point. And that roundabout might slow it down.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. I heard you say, so summary of your feedback, I heard that there's a lot of traffic coming through that intersection and that support possibly for concept 3, where the roundabout may help to slow that traffic down. Could Fran address the question about the water main on Winchell and whether that is transferring to 12-inch water main service?
Yes, it is. There's currently already a 12-inch, but it was not reconnected. So there will be some trench work to reconnect service lines from your property to the 12-inch water main.
Okay, thank you, Fran. And then I did hear your support, Jean, for the idea of the sidewalk in the parking lane to save some of the trees. You also had a question where you mentioned that in each of the concepts, I think I may have missed one of your other points. If there's something I didn't reiterate here that you want to clarify, or if other staff heard that nuance, I think it was about a variation in the sidewalk with each of these 3 concepts, maybe. Jean, go ahead. Yep.
Okay, I like the concept 3 of the street, okay? And I also like the idea of the sidewalk on the front property of the front of my property. That would be integrated into the street more and leaving some of the trees there. Now, the pedestrian traffic on Brockman, because there's a school over there, there's a lot of traffic. There's a lot of pedestrian traffic, and the people or the kids come across the street at Stadium and stay on the side of the street that doesn't have a sidewalk right now on Brockman. So they come walking down to that property lane and in the street. So to me, a sidewalk at that point is very good and very effective for pedestrian safety. And
Okay.
the other thing about Winchell Drive, during the winter, it becomes a one-way street because the snow is not completely removed to the sides. So parking there on one side would be most effective.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jean. So, yep, heard the support for the sidewalk on Brockman for the children coming and going from school, the improvement for pedestrian safety there, and then the note about the conditions during winter and snow and how that impacts the travel on Winchell, I believe it was. Okay, thank you. Now let's look at the questions that have been written in. I do see, Ruth, that you have your hand raised. We'll get back to you. We have a note about an individual who has a sump pump drain that empties where the sidewalk would be. Nick, I'll hand that over to you.
Yeah, I'll take that. Oh. Sorry, a little feedback there. Yeah, I'll take that one. I would suggest that you put that when you fill out your survey, to put that in there along with your address, and we can reach out to you directly and figure out a way to get your sump pump discharged connected in such a way, or discharged in such a way that it will not be impacted. So we can work around that. We'll just have to have a one-on-one conversation with you about that.
All right, thank you. And have possible locations for pedestrian crossings at Winchell and Brockman been evaluated for pedestrian and driver sight lines up and down Brockman? Is that Cynthia?
I'm happy to take that. I will say that the concepts that we have put forward, we are showing the locations where we think the most logical crossing locations will be. And as part of final design, all of those site distance, all the available site distance will be verified in the field. At this point, they all look like they'll be all right. The current conditions, however, are much more challenging as far as where to put crossings. So as you can see, there isn't a connection shown from Carhartt to the north side of Brockman, because there isn't a good place to put a crossing in there. It's a very, very wide crossing. So think about yourself as a 6-year-old trying to walk across there. That would be a very uncomfortable thing. And with having that island there, you don't have good sight lines as a result of that. So there isn't anything on the west side of the intersection. That's why everything is shown over on the east side of the intersection. So in all of these concept sketches, the crossings are shown in locations where they make sense as far as being able to be seen and minimizing crossing distance and maximizing safety.
Thank you. In a similar vein, there's a question about whether a pedestrian island has been considered for Brockman and Winchell.
I think that the best way to answer that is that all of the concepts that we're putting together, we're attempting to minimize crossing distances, so that an island such as has been referenced in the question, that's really, a good portion of what it's doing. It's minimizing crossing distance, minimizing the area that you're exposed to traffic as a pedestrian. And while we don't have any median islands shown in any of these concepts, except for concept 3, which is the roundabout concept, so I guess we haven't thought about them further than the concepts that are shown right now. That was a long way to say that, I'm sorry.
So is that perhaps something we could consider as concepts are refined to see if there's opportunity?
Yeah, I think that is something that we could consider. Narrowings can happen in 2 ways, right? They can either happen on the outside of the street, bringing the outside of the street footprint in, or in the middle of the street. I think depending on where we end up, what concept for the intersection we end up moving forward, we can take a look at that. I think it would be also, if whoever posted that comment has some clarifying information that they wanted to post, and we can circle around back to that later if they are thinking about a particular concept or not.
Okay, great. Thank you, Cynthia. Also, just a note here that a number of years ago, there was a late night traffic fatality just west of where the existing island is. So thank you for that additional feedback. And unfortunate and sorry to hear that, but we appreciate having a more holistic view of the crash history. Could perhaps Cynthia or Fran talk about the signage? What type of signage would be associated with each of the three concepts for the intersection?
Sure, I can take that. The only one of these concepts that is really intending to change traffic control at the intersection is concept 3. So in concept 1 and 2, both Carhartt and Winchell, as they're coming into the intersection proper, would still be stop controlled. And with concept 3, then you would have yield on entry as you do at all roundabouts. So signage would not change significantly from what's existing. If we are moving forward a concept that allows a crosswalk that would be leading more directly into Carhartt, then we would definitely be looking at, and honestly, with the existing conditions concept where we have just the single crossing of Winchell Brockman, because Carhartt is leading directly to the school, that is a direct route down to the school, it would make sense to have school crossing signage there. And as concept 3, looking at that roundabout, it would be signage similar to the existing neighborhood roundabout that's on Pittsfield Boulevard.
Thank you, Cynthia. While we're on the topic of signage, can you address whether stop signs have been considered northbound on Brockman?
Not at this point, and I don't know why we would consider only northbound on Brockman and not both approaches on Brockman. What I will say is that I think the first next step for us in this vein would be figuring out which concept we're going to be moving forward, and then we can take a look at traffic control. Stop signs and the placement of stop signs are regulated by the Michigan Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, and they are intended to regulate conflict at an intersection. And so there are warrants that we would evaluate to determine if a multi-way or all-way stop condition was warranted at this particular location. But I will also say that stop signs are expressly prohibited from being used as speed control. So it does look at volumes and what the conflict at the intersection is.
Thank you. Could you also talk about how school buses would navigate the roundabout in concept 3?
Sure. We design for school buses all the time. So a couple of different things that we can do is, we have what are called turning templates. So we talk to the school district about how they're using the intersection, and we put those turning templates for that particular vehicle on the design and make sure that we can accommodate the design, that design vehicle turn. And some ways that we can accommodate those types of movements at an intersection is particularly an intersection with a high level of transit, such as the route into school. You can have a flush concrete apron and then go up into your curbed area. Another trick that is used in designing these that there are a lot of different ways that we can address that. I'll leave it at that for now, because I know we are starting to run short on time.
Thank you, Cynthia. Then this one is more of a comment. Traffic speeds on Brockman are well above the speed limit, and the curve of the road and incline lead traffic to cross into the other lane, creating hazards for pedestrians. The street sees more traffic than most residential neighborhoods. An elevated island may be needed to afford protection. So this is addressing pedestrian safety and the fact that cars may be crossing into the other direction of travel. Is there anything that staff wanted to comment on in relation to that? I think that's helpful feedback to hear as we're considering these. We'll leave it at that. And related to crossing, pedestrians have difficulty crossing streets near roundabouts. The crosswalks in option 3 need protection for middle schoolers and others. Again, another comment. I'll pause in case staff want to unmute to address, but I think that, again, that's helpful feedback to hear. For concept 3, can we clarify median crossings? Is that the traffic island, or is that the broken crosswalk to the west of the island? So in concept 3, I think by broken, that's referring to where the crosswalk is interrupted at that kind of triangle shaped frame. Maybe you could use your cursor to illustrate where that triangle is kind of painted. Oh. And Cynthia, do you want to explain what is meant by median crossings, or if that's the correct term to use here? Because I think we're talking about those triangle shapes as compared to the center oval.
Yeah, those are splitter islands, and as a residential street, they could be painted. They could be a paint and post. They could, a flush area is not an uncommon treatment for a local, low volume local residential streets, such as the intersections at the intersection on Pittsfield. I'm hearing a lot of concern from the community, though, about having that as being perfectly flush and not having some sort of an additional element in there. So I think as we, if we're moving this concept forward, that's definitely something that we can look at in a little more detail.
And thank you, Cynthia. Concept 2 specifically, this one may have, I think you addressed signage pretty thoroughly, but this was about concept 2, traffic signage and traffic pattern. If a car is coming from Winchell to Brockman at the same time that a car is coming from Carhartt to Brockman, how is that navigated?
Yeah, so instead of having one very large intersection in this concept, you have 2 smaller intersections. So Carhartt would have a stop sign where it enters Winchell, and then Winchell would have a stop sign as it enters Brockman.
All right, thank you. And let's move on then to a question about sidewalk. And I'll take 2 more questions from the written comments, and then we'll take the 2 hand raises from Ruth and Allison. And that may wrap us up as we're in our last 15 minutes here. So on the sidewalk question, is there no option to do an in-street sidewalk along Brockman and Frieze? I think that may be referring to the idea of similar to what is proposed on Winchell to bump out the sidewalk. Could Fran perhaps respond to that?
Yes, no, there isn't. What we're doing at Winchell is more of an exception because we noticed that there is that many trees that we would be cutting down. But normally the standard is to build sidewalks, 5-foot sidewalks within our right of way, not on the road. And yeah, we're doing an exception in this case because we want to preserve the trees. And during a certain amount, for a short length, we can do that. We can narrow the street and remove the parking and build a sidewalk there. But maybe Nick has.
I would add to that concept on Winchell would have a sidewalk that is, behind the curb too, a sidewalk in the street, if that's what is meant by that comment, would not generally be considered something we would consider safe to do. We would want it separated from the road, at least by an elevation. I would also add too that along Brockman, we have looked at an alignment for a sidewalk in there that does not need to remove any trees. So that, and we can certainly take a closer look at that. We'll talk it through with our forestry expert as well. But we don't believe that any trees would need to be removed along Brockman.
Okay, thank you. And was a survey, this is in regard to the cars parking on Winchell and the potential for on-street parking removal. It seems there's a number of cars that park on Winchell during ball season. Both sides of Winchell are often parked full. Where would ball teams park? Where would school parents park during overflow times? Is there anything kind of more commentary about just the amount of space available and the need for parking and the demand in that area? But if there's anything we can add on how much surveying we did, if any, of the on-street parking currently, that'd be helpful.
Just to throw something out on this real quickly, maybe Cynthia can weigh in if need be, but I think that might go down towards what Cynthia was talking about earlier about potentially lifting the parking restriction further down next to the park. And if that's the case, that opens up a whole lot of additional parking spaces.
Great. Thank you. And now let's take the question from Ruth. Ruth, you can unmute and ask your question or share your comment. While we're waiting, Ruth, I've enabled your microphone. You'll just unmute. But in the meantime, I do see a question about how long the survey will remain open. That will be open for 2 weeks. And we're hoping to get some feedback within the next 2 weeks and close that on October 13th so we can keep the project design process moving forward. And Ruth, it looks like you've now unmuted. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, that was my question about the on-street parking for the ball teams and the school. So thank you for answering it.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Ruth. Appreciate that. Allison, please go ahead and ask your question or share your comment.
Thank you. Just a quick comment. So our kids go to St. Francis and a lot of the staff also park on Winchell in that area. So just another thing to consider because they need to free up space in the front parking lot for drop off and families coming in. But actually what I had wanted to comment on was just some of the sidewalk stuff. First of all, I just wanted to echo, we actually live down between Frieze and Steer on Brockman. And I wanted to echo the comment earlier about the sidewalk gap there, because we see people walking in the street all the time past our property. And, living there, it is very, I think it is a high risk, and it's a major area for kids to walk through on their way to schools. And so I know this is outside of the scope of this project, but just want to echo that comment that I hope that'll be considered. And I wanted to ask specifically about the configuration up at the corner of Brockman and Frieze, because now that there are going to be sidewalks installed, Frieze, I don't know if there's been thought or intentional decision not to have any kind of crossing there. Having tried to cross there in the past, it is a very scary place to try to cross because cars are coming up the hill around Brockman. You can't see, and I don't know if part of the crosswalk design near this proposed near the little median is to provide a crossing place. I guess I wanted to see if you guys could comment on that in both those areas. And I think that's part of why the sidewalk on the other side of Brockman it might be useful, is because there's not another good place to cross. We have lived here for 4 years and we had to map out a very elaborate route for our kids to walk to school. They have to go all the way down to St. Francis Drive where there's a stop sign in order to have continuous sidewalks and to be able to cross at a fairly safe place.
I'll just jump in there real quick. We would have crossings at Frieze and Brockman as part of this. Once the sidewalks go in, there would be an actual place to cross to. So, and we would put the appropriate. And I'll also make another pitch real quickly, since you mentioned the sidewalk gaps further west on Brockman, for taking a look at the sidewalk gap program. Again, a2gov.org/sidewalks. There is a place in there regarding a petition. The petition can help in our prioritization system for a sidewalk gap to score more points in that system and raise the priority. So please consider that, maybe take a look at that on that webpage as well.
Thanks, Nick. I see one comment in here. The survey ends after 2 weeks. The session won't appear for a week. Can we extend the survey to give people time to digest the proposals? I do expect that this this presentation can likely be posted, if not tomorrow, the next day. We say a week as our standard to allow for any, if there's someone out of the office, someone unable to transfer it, we have to work with our CTN cable television staff to get the recording posted. But it's usually a really quick turnaround. So we will get working on this first thing tomorrow morning, and I hope to have it live for you very soon on a very quick turnaround. And the presentation slides will absolutely be posted tomorrow. Those we can do right away and doesn't require other staff coordination. You'll have access to those proposals right away. I hope that helps. Few comments on, okay, so this is a comment about the sidewalk being closer to the road on Winchell and clarification about the parking. And I think Cynthia had done a more detailed response on this, but maybe we can briefly reiterate what would this mean for parking between Carhartt and Hall on Winchell? Does this mean there will be no parking on either side? And I'm not familiar exactly with the location of the park that you were referencing, Cynthia, as a potential for bringing parking back. So I don't, maybe you can address whether that provides some parking in that stretch.
So the park that I was referring to is further to the east, at the corner with St. Francis Drive. The area between Winchell and Fran will correct me if I am wrong here, and Hall, which is trying to measure it right now, and I'm not managing to do that. So it doesn't want to work. Of course, it doesn't want to work for me. It's a short 1 block in the area where the street gets narrowed to 20 feet in width. That area would not be able to support parking on either side of the street. And east of Hall, particularly as you get closer to Winchell Park, that's where the street is really widening out. Because currently in Winchell, it is a little bit narrower. But as you get to the park and the street widens out, there is definitely room for parking on both sides of the street. But at this point in time, there are parking restrictions that are in place that we could lift those parking restrictions and open up more parking in the area.
All right, thank you, Cynthia. And how would the crossings at Frieze and Brockman be kept safe from traffic heading north on Brockman? Is there anything we can comment on in relation to the safety of crossings at Frieze and Brockman?
As we're moving the design forward, the transportation staff will take a look at that intersection and make determinations as far as what type of pavement markings and signage need to be in place out there.
Thank you. And this was a follow-up comment from Ken earlier when we talked about vegetation in the island, the roundabout island of concept 3, and Ken noted that the planting a tree in that spot might not be good for visibility. And so I think that may have been addressed, so that it might be like a different vegetation, not necessarily a tree. But Cynthia, is that anything you want to clarify?
Sure, I'm happy to talk about plantings in the middle of roundabout islands. So in central islands and roundabouts, it's actually recommended to have vertical elements, such as trees or tall grasses that limit that straight line across the intersection sight line, because it helps to reinforce the fact that in a roundabout, you need to be looking in the circulating roadway. So you're looking to the pedestrian space that is crossing the direction you're approaching from, and you're looking to the left for approaching vehicles. And you having things in the middle that are vertical help to reinforce that look to the left, so that you're not looking at what the traffic is across the street, because you need to be looking to your left. So that is tall stuff in there is actually pretty okay.
Thanks, Cynthia. Appreciate that clarification and additional information. There's one remaining written in comment, and it was someone who wrote in correction crossing of Brockman from Carhartt. It's from an anonymous attendee. Unfortunately, the way these come in, you may have been responding to some question we were addressing at the time, but it doesn't show me which original statement that was linked to. So crossing of Brockman from Carhartt, if anyone wants to write in clarification, further clarification on that, please do, or raise your hand and we can take a final comment. We do have a few more minutes here. I don't see any other hands raised, but if there is anyone who wanted to share other comments or questions. And I see, sorry, if you want to share other comments or questions, please raise your hand. Now I do see that response. It refers to pedestrian island crossing. Okay, so crossing of Brockman from Carhartt. It was referring to the pedestrian island.
I think that's probably referring to the area we already talked about in that splitter island area to the west of the intersection.
Okay. Great.
I think we addressed that.
Thank you. Well, with our last couple minutes, again, feel free to pop your hand, raise your hand, throw a comment into the Q&A if something comes to mind. But otherwise, I'll let Fran review contact information and next steps. And I will go ahead. You know, I actually can't. We had said we would paste the survey link into the chat, but the way the webinar is set up in Zoom, I can't actually paste anything in there. But the survey is shown on screen here, a2gov.org/Winchell survey. And I'm going to make that link available on the website right now as well. And you'll be able to click that directly from the same website where you found the link to this meeting. Now over to you, Fran.
Thank you, Kayla. Yeah, just reiterate all comments regarding the different alternatives for Winchell Sidewalk, as well as the concepts for the intersection at Brockman and Winchell. Those are part of the survey, so we really would appreciate if all of you would take a few minutes. It's just 10 questions to look at the survey. We have diagrams embedded in that survey, so concept 1, 2, and 3. And again, these are initial concepts, so even if you vote on one, that doesn't mean that you won't get to vote again or that it's final in any way. We really want to hear your concerns and be able to answer them. And if you have any specific concerns for your property, feel free to send me an email. And within that survey, I think the best way is to write your question and then just ask, can I get a phone call, or I would like to meet with you and I can get back to you.
And just to reiterate too, even if you provided feedback here tonight, we still encourage everybody to go and actually take the survey so that we have all that data recorded there. So please do that. Thanks.
All right, so that closes us out. I don't see any other questions at this point or any other hands raised. Thank you all for your time this evening. Thank you for your thoughtful comments, questions, and participation in the discussion. It was very helpful. It'll be helpful for the project team as they're refining concepts, and we look forward to your feedback to the survey. Have a nice evening, and thanks again. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.